I have a panel of people who are going to fill the room with examples of engaging young people to social good and the lessons we can learn from these real-life examples to guide the future work of the Red Cross. But I'm a great believer. I'm 60, I'm old, and that's why I'm a living legend. At least I'm not dead. And therefore we must begin with someone young. Mickey Nguyen, where are you? He's 18 years old. I'll hurtle towards you. Everybody breathe in. Here I come. We might run down the front, mate, so they can see you. If you could chase me with a bit of speed. Is anyone younger than Mickey? Could give him a round of applause. Can you just introduce yourself and explain your connection to Red Cross?
Hi, I'm Mickey.
I never let it go.
I'm the president of the University of New South Wales Red Cross Society, and I'm also an intern working under Nicholas Nelson, so yeah.
And why did you get involved with the Red Cross?
It's a loaded question. Because honestly, because I saw Red Cross is probably one of the largest and most significant NGOs in the world, so I thought I'd start there as a career opportunity.
Okay, good on you. And what are you studying?
International studies.
Okay, now they're separate but equal, but very connected to involving young people in leadership as volunteers and as beneficiaries of service. That's what this is about. There's also this strength-based approach project happening, and if you want to be interviewed, I think you have to be young. I'll check what the age range is. No, you probably don't have to be. It can be any age at all. This is a group of Red Cross people who are interviewing people about what's working well so they can build on it, and it's a project at least over the next 12 months. And you've been taken into a room for an appreciative inquiry interview. One of the things I've learned about Red Cross is you use language in a tremendously interesting way. Now, you've been appreciatively inquired. What? Only recently? What happened in that room?
Do you really want to know? David basically interviewed me on where I could see Red Cross going if it wanted to propel its engagement with youth in the future.
Okay, and I think they asked you, you know, what would it look like in 5 years' time? So what tips did you give them? What's your vision for the Red Cross?
A lot of social media activity, because Red Cross is, I feel bad for saying this, behind the curve in terms of social media, in terms of, if in comparison to Oak Tree and Amnesty. So if Red Cross wanted to engage with youth, then social media would be one of the biggest platforms that it needs to engage with.
Give us an example of the purpose of the engagement, the result you'd be trying to get.
Well, there are plenty of case studies on the internet that show this. Like, there's Humans of New York. I'm pretty sure a lot of people have heard about that.
Just explain it. Oh, look, just wait there for a second. Come over here. You nodded in a knowing fashion, therefore you must be young. Do you mind just coming and saying hello? Let's aim at them so they can see you. What's your name and what do you do?
My name's Hannah. I'm from South Australia. I am a volunteer.
And what did he just say?
He said Humans of New York.
Humans of New York. And what's that?
It is a website run by someone who goes around New York interviewing people and shares people's life stories. And he must have the most amazing way of interviewing people because he gets people's deepest emotions and experiences. It's amazing.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Would you give her a clap? So, what could Red Cross learn from that?
Well, Red Cross has an amazing potential to engage with youth because it's involved in about, I don't know, plenty of developing programs around the world. So it has the ability to share a lot of the stories and connect people in Australia with people in other countries if it was able to perform on a platform like Humans of New York. So yeah, if it was able to bring it down onto an individual level, its programs, then I reckon that would increase youth engagement or societal engagement a lot.
Over Australia, there are hundreds of organisations who want to engage with you. What will keep you with Red Cross, engaging in all sorts of ways for a good 5 to 10 years?
What would keep me with Red Cross?
What would you have to get out of it to feel like, yeah, I'm going to stay here. I won't go off to that bloody Oak Tree. Amnesty, Patooey. Or you might like partnerships, I don't know. But I'm just just, let's talk Turkey. People want you. You're a young, intelligent Vietnamese man of origin, and we want you. How are we going to keep you?
Re-innovate Red Cross. I know that's quite a controversial thing to say, but Red Cross does need a little bit of innovation if it wants to keep the youth active, because right now Amnesty, Oak Tree, all the societies are taking over a little bit, and Red Cross has a massive cultural and historical foundation that it can use to engage in youth. So if it can utilize that, then that'd be great.
Thank you so much. Would you give him a clap, please? Daniel Hammer, no, Nicholas Nelson, where are you? Nicholas, come here. I think he said he was working under you. Is that what he just said? Let's walk over here so people over this side get to see us. We might even stand here so we've got a little bit of height. You can stand down there. Oh, no. No, that was a joke. That was a joke. Do you want to just introduce yourself and tell them what you do?
Yeah, sure. So I'm the New South Wales Youth Engagement Officer.
You've done some stuff with the Obama campaign. Just explain why that's relevant to this notion of strength-based work and what we're talking about here, engaging young people.
Yeah, so when I was working on that campaign, basically the idea was that every volunteer that came in on board was...
They're laughing at my intensity with the microphone. I let it go 6 years ago, never have since. I'll tell you the story later.
Okay, so the idea was that every volunteer had agency. So if you looked at the strengths of the volunteer, that maybe they weren't a great speaker, but they were a great organiser. Maybe they were a great speaker, but they weren't so good at handing flyers out. So you looked at which ways you could be effective with those volunteers and make them contribute to the campaign, not just see them as another, they're another bloody volunteer, we'll just get them to go off and do this, but make them run the campaign. And so that's the practice that we've taken into youth engagement in New South Wales. We see that young people know young people the best. So we hand the program over to them and say, what would you like to see? How would you like to run things? And so that's sort of how you do it.
And one example you've got is this internship. Just in a nutshell, what are you doing and what's coming up in February 2015?
Sure. So we figured that the one big thing that facing young people is getting a job. It's a really hard market out there, and people want different skills, and they want to have something on their CV, which is... sorry, the microphone thing is...
I'm so sorry. Stop it. Listen to him.
So the thing is that they need skills and they need opportunities, and they need something they can say, I've left this volunteer role, this internship, I've gotten these skills that I can transfer into this job, and they can go to an employer in an interview and talk about what that is and really be able to own it. So we developed this internship program, and we said, we know that when you finish uni, it's really hard. You've never actually been taught. You've been taught plenty of theory and plenty of examples of the world around you, but not actually how to go and get a job using those skills. So we've put together a graduate skills course. We've got 100 people signed up already. It's happening in February, and basically what that is Sophie, who's put that together, is just in the audience there. She's been helping us out with that. And basically it's saying to young people, you want to go and get a job, here's how you do it. Here's how you do it. Selection criteria, resume, cover letters, here's where you look for jobs, what sort of jobs you can get, what you can expect, how to expect knockbacks, who to go and speak to, and we've got a lineup of inspiring speakers coming and doing the program too.
And how is that an example of service delivery to young people? It's an example of volunteering. It's an example of paid staff leadership. It's actually all three, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so, basically we understand that if the Red Cross's average age membership is 77, so if we want to get young people on board, we've got to give young people something which they can connect with. And so internships is something they can connect with. Getting a job, being helped out is part of our humanitarian mission, but it's also something young people connect with. So that's why I've developed it.
Thank you so much. Would you give him a round of applause, please? And where's Chris Kwong? Where's Chris? Oh, listen, you follow me over here. You've always got to give every bit of the audience an opportunity. Chase me, chase me, chase me. Oh. One of the things... do you want to introduce yourself?
No.
No, just say who you are and what you were doing until, I think, 5 p.m. yesterday.
Yeah, well, until 5 p.m. yesterday, I was the National Youth Member and a member of the board.
That's right. And what does the board do?
The board plays an important governance role to ensure that in terms of everything that we do, there's obviously accountability, transparency, but also importantly, setting the strategic direction for this movement in Australia.
I said to him, well, you know, what can we offer? I mean, to be on the board, to be in a governance position and to be young, it's so thrilling. So I suggested, what are 3 tips you would give other young people who get a chance to be involved in governance? Let's stand up here, because governance can seem like such a boring word, can't it? What is governance?
That's a good question. There are many definitions. I think that it's a difficult thing to see, but effectively, in a few words, it's about setting a strategy for the organisation and then ensuring that the organisation continues to move towards that strategy.
This man is good. These are hard questions. I didn't give him a warm-up on this. Have you got an ongoing connection to Red Cross?
I do. I think it started on quite early in terms of my own background.
Tell us that. What's your connection?
Basically, my initial connection with Red Cross, Australian Red Cross formerly, was through IHL and Laws of War. And the reason for that is because of my mum's background as a Vietnamese refugee. So mum and her dad, my grandfather was a prisoner of war and mum was a refugee, and throughout that time, Red Cross had a bit of involvement there. So
this is personal.
It is personal.
Yeah. 3 tips you'd give other young people given the chance to be on a board, and then we must get off this carefully because people are worried we're going to fall.
I'll hold your hand. The first tip I would say is be bold. Do not be afraid to basically make mistakes, because I think in order to push boundaries, we need to accept failure and learn from those failures.
That's such a good point. And when you knew nothing, and you knew nothing when people were talking on the board, although I can barely imagine it with you, what did you do?
Bluff.
Why is it sometimes necessary to bluff? Because it is, isn't it?
It is. I think what you do learn is every now and then, it doesn't matter what age you are, there are things that you're not going to know. And once you accept that, it becomes a lot easier.
So it's okay not to understand. You also said surround yourself with supporters.
Yeah. I think particularly in the role as a national youth member, you have a role as a board member, but also a particular role that's identified as a youth leader, and you can become quite lonely because it's just one person role. So it's important for you to build a network around you of people that you can rely on, but also people that you can help, so to speak, elevate and show that there are other people involved in the organisation who are also capable of doing exactly the same thing that you're doing. It's just that it happens to be that there's only one formal role.
And the other was embrace the opportunity.
Indeed. I think it's been 3 years for me. It's been an absolute privilege to be a part of this organisation, to be able to influence discussions at both the national level, local level, but also internationally as well. And I think those opportunities coming at a young age is rare, so you've got to embrace it, because who knows what's going to happen.
And how old are you?
I'm 29.
Okay. Thank you. Would you give him a round of applause, please? In preparing for this today, I think it's on my mind because my mother's having her 90th birthday this week. Both my mother and father were in uniform in the Second World War along with their siblings and so on. And they were in leadership and in life-threatening situations, leadership positions, and by the time the war ended, they weren't 24. Just share that. In wartime, we send out young people to do extraordinary things, don't we? With amazing degrees of responsibility. I'd like to welcome now Benson Saulo and ask for our first images to come up on the screen, if I could, with our technical team. Thank you. And you're able to see what's there. Benson is a senior consultant with PricewaterhouseCoopers Indigenous Consulting, and a former director of the National Indigenous Youth Leadership Academy. Would you make him welcome, please? Benson, do you mind standing up and holding the mic really close to your mouth? I just think in the afternoon people need energy to stay alert. I want to fill the room with examples of really good engagement of young people. Tell us about the National Indigenous Youth Leadership Academy. What was its purpose and how did you involve the young?
Sure. So the National Indigenous Youth Leadership Academy, or NILA as we know it, started that in 2012, and it was actually born out of frustration. So previous to that role, I was the Australian Youth Rep to the United Nations. So I was based in New York, but I also had the opportunity to travel right around Australia, meeting with organisations and young people and understanding what drives them, what they're passionate about. And then I realised when I was across the UN and I was leading a couple of negotiations that there's a great disconnect between the rhetoric at the international level to what's being spoken about at the national level, and then a further disconnect between what's happening or what's being spoken about at a grassroots level. And the one thing that I found that was really missing was young people's voices participating in social action or having a meaningful conversation, and that being reflected at a national level. So the National Indigenous Youth Leadership Academy, I'm going to refer to it as NILA. Introducing yourself on the phone is always really long. They're like, who? Anyway, and so it was actually set up to connect a generation of young change makers or young Indigenous change makers that are passionate about social issues that actually want to have a positive impact on their communities and beyond.
How can you tell authentic engagement from tokenism? That's one of the questions that's been put to me.
So tokenism in the Indigenous space is it's been around for a long time. So it's like, for instance, we spoke about governance before, boards or advisory boards, and having, this is the Indigenous space or this is the Indigenous seat, and we're going to refer to all the Indigenous questions to this person and expect them to know all the answers. So there's an element of tokenism that exists, and it still exists. But when we talk about meaningful engagement, we're talking about bottom-up driven or co-designed, elements of a program. So actually bringing people in, meaningfully engaging, meaningfully listening and reflecting, their own words within the development of an organisation or a program.
You told me that you had 10 different campaigns involving 450 young people, and I asked him could he choose a couple, and one of them was GBLTI and the other was suicide prevention, and you said you wanted to illustrate deep engagement. Can you talk about those examples and what made them deep?
Sure. So that was both of these campaigns. So in the last 2 years, we launched 10 youth-led national campaigns, developed over a week or 2 weeks over the course of 2 years. And so the suicide prevention one, we actually partnered with Are You OK Day. So many of you may have heard about Are You OK Day. And it's around asking that question. So we're working with 50 young Indigenous kids from right across Australia during our national gathering. We brought them together. Actually, I might talk about the philosophy because that kind of leads into that. So the idea behind our engagement, or where I feel engagement is, I personally love curiosity. I think curiosity is one of those things that you can tell in a person, so the questions that they ask, the way they view the world. And so the way that we bring young people together is actually to identify curious minds. So for instance, what is the most amazing thing about the world is something I would ask a young person. And one of my favorite answers was, I would love to live inside a volcano so I could understand how it works. I went, you are in. I wanted to do that. And also another one was, I wish I could fly a plane because I would fly it over the Bermuda Triangle, go down and find all the other lost ships. I wanted to write a book about the Bermuda Triangle when I was like 9 years old. So I was like, yeah, you're in. And it's this curiosity that when we bring people together, they're viewing themselves differently or viewing their community or the role that they can play within their community differently. And then from that, once you have like-minded people, understanding shared values, so understanding individual personal values, and then shared values. And then we believe that your values will influence what you're passionate about. And then it's in that space of what you care about or what you're passionate about, and what you don't stand for. In that space of what you don't stand for is the space in which social action can take place.
Can I just ask you something?
Sure.
I really agree with you about curiosity. I've worked as a teacher, and I often have thought you actually can't teach curiosity. It's a gift probably that's partly personality type and partly engendered by family modelling. And when you're dealing with really disadvantaged people, they can seem not curious, but they're probably depressed. I once knew a man out west, if I could bear one quick anecdote, who was assessed for a stroke. He was so passive and not talking and weeping, and it turned out he was just depressed. So I guess I'm just sharing that challenge. Like, when you're dealing with really devastated communities, do you just have to start with the ones who've kept the spark, or can you engender curiosity?
I personally believe that everyone is born curious. There's a little saying about a creative adult is a child that never lost its curiosity, and so I really believe that it is actually innate. It's something that's like values. It's universal. It's timeless, and it only takes, that I find, is just something to spark it. So everyone in this room, while you may not personally see yourself as curious, you'll question something, or you'll find something that you like. I almost call you as like tinkerers and tailors. It's like being able to work on the fringe to be able to change something or to play with something, and I think that's curiosity.
Okay, well, tell us what you did with Are You OK Day with the young people.
So with Are You OK? So we looked at what is something that's really impacting communities, and we saw the Overcoming Aboriginal Disadvantage or Indigenous Disadvantage report come out yesterday, and saying suicide is actually a lot higher. So in some communities, it's 11 times higher for young adult males. And so we had this group of young people, and we take them through, it's a series of workshops, but we identified that it was actually young people feeling isolated, not feeling that they could actually speak to anyone. So rather than actually tackling the big issue of suicide, we actually looked at meaningful conversations or meaningful community conversations. And so this campaign was actually about young people connecting with their peers, connecting with their elders, but also connecting with their family, essentially, and just asking, are you okay? But then actually being equipped so they can have that meaningful conversation, and then knowing where they could direct people.
Tell us about the GBLTI.
So this one is something I'm particularly proud of, because a young fellow called James Clark, who identifies, is from Western Australia, and this was one of the campaigns that we launched this year. And he was really worried, so he got up that morning and he's like, I don't know if anyone is going to support me on this campaign. And at that stage, it was just titled as GBLTI issue, or same-sex attracted young people. And he put his name up on the board and he said, all right, this is the campaign that I'm passionate about, that I want to do. And then within the space of 10, 15 minutes, we had, it was filled up, there was 15 names on that board. And so they were looking at this idea around unity, or putting unity in community. So he himself has, he's been the victim of, name calling and issues, and just not feeling very welcome, and not having any positive male role models in his life because of the issues that he's faced. And so suddenly this whole group came around him, and they launched, within 48 hours, we launched the 5 campaigns, but this one put unity in the community. You can look it up on YouTube and also on Facebook. And they've been able to build a great and welcoming campaign around young people that identify and that also go beyond their families and go beyond their communities. So that's one campaign that I'm particularly proud of, knowing how much anguish and hurt that he felt as a young person, and then suddenly having a community stand behind him and stand beside him.
Could I just ask you one more thing on that, and I'll move to another panel member, but the issue of homosexuality is obviously incredibly sensitive in many communities, including Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities. For example, within the Uniting Church, where there is a progressive attitude to gay and lesbian people in the sense they can be ordained, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Commission within the church has opposed that and opposes the support for gay marriage, for example. And so I'm just wondering, is that partly a generational issue? Do you think younger people are more likely to be open on that, or not?
I personally believe it is I think it is a generational issue. So for our young people, it's to identify or not to identify, it makes no difference. It's like we're all young people. We have the same human rights. We should all expect the same from each other. It's this idea of I'm my brother's keeper, I'm my sister's keeper, that we're all actually, our lives are actually tied in this world together. And so when you talk about the Uniting Church and issues around opposing same-sex marriage and so this, it is, I think it is tied to, religion as an institution. But then also generational kind of divide. And so what I like to see, and I'm very hopeful, see these young people up here. These people are the ones these are the young people here that, are very welcoming, very supportive, and advocates as well for ensuring that everyone has equal access to rights, that everyone feels welcome in their communities, everyone feels supported within their schools, and bullying is stamped out, because it's something that is rife within our communities. Not only Aboriginal communities, but rife within non-Aboriginal communities and rife within school communities.
Look, thank you so much. Would you give him a warm round of applause, please? And I'm just going through a couple of other images there that I have. And now we move to Oak Tree. If I could ask the microphone to go to Chris Wallace. And Chris, do you mind standing up? And if you talk into the top of the mic, that's where the reproduction of sound is. Chris is the incoming CEO of the Oak Tree, and he also gives blood for Red Cross. But other than giving blood, this is his first contact. So I think we should make him particularly welcome. Would you give him another round of applause? We have a whole lot of images of some work that Oak Tree's done, including the Oak Tree road trip, if we could have his images up. But just first, before we begin, what is Oak Tree so people can know?
Yeah, well, thanks, Julie, and thank you all for that welcome. It's just so exciting to be here and to hear so much about what Red Cross does. Oak Tree is Australia's largest youth-run movement, and what we are is a movement of young people leading the charge to end extreme poverty. So what does that look like for us? We've got offices in every state in Australia. We've got 150 staff-level volunteers. We're all volunteers at Oak Tree, and about 150,000 people that have interacted with Oak Tree in some way.
Well, we heard earlier that you're doing wondrous things on the digital world, on the web. But can you just give us a quick sketch of how you use the new technology?
Yeah, sure. So technology is really critical for us for engaging with young people. The way Oak Tree works in Australia, we've got work overseas as well in Southeast Asia. But in Australia, what we're aiming to do is create a movement of young people. And there's different layers in that movement. So you've got people that are committed, that are at a volunteer level, and they engage. They might do 10 hours a week, 20 hours a week, 30 hours a week, and that's their level of engagement. But then you've got the people that might interact on social media. They might sign our petition. They might tell their friends about Oak Tree's work. And that's where social media for us is really powerful, because it enables us to have a massive reach. Just to give you an example, we recently did an End Poverty petition. We took 400 people on a road trip from every state in Australia to Parliament House. And as part of that petition, we had 10,000 signatures, but we reached 1.5 million people through social media. And by that we mean that 1.5 million people source our posts through social media on that topic.
And that's individual people.
Individual people, yeah. So that's how, and those people will be engaged right at the sort of the community level, the outer level of our movement. But through social media, that's how we essentially spread the message.
If you could just tip it up, I am obsessed with microphone technique. Reproduction of sound is actually at the top. If you put it like that, see how it sounds different? But if you put it like that, it sounds like that. That's my contribution to youth engagement. Proving that arthritic 60-year-olds have still got a little bit to offer.
Lots to offer, I think.
But let's come back to the road trip and that 400 young people to Canberra. There was a whole process, wasn't there, of activities. Run us through the different things the young people did before they got to meet the politician.
Yeah, so what we did was we basically invited people to sign up as community leaders, and then we ran these masterclasses all throughout Australia in the capital cities, basically training them up in social advocacy and political advocacy. So everyone was engaged in some level before they came on the week-long road trip. And then what we did was that from every capital city, and people campaigned, for example, in WA and then flew across, jump in buses, and we go throughout the regional regions of those states, stopping at country towns, speaking at schools, getting people to sign petitions, doing a lot of local media. Again, all young people, all engaging with the community in that way. And then we got to Canberra.
And when you say engaging with media, the young people on the bus got to do a whole lot of interviews, got to issue press releases. I guess one of the things we're being asked to do is what lessons are there from these good examples that can guide the future work of Red Cross? And I'm sorry, Benson, I forgot to ask you that, so I will again, what lessons you would offer. But one of them from you is do stuff with clear results.
Yeah, that's right. So Oak Tree is entirely run by people under the age of 27. So that means that we had young people that might have done a couple of weeks training with us, running, being interviewed on, Channel 7 Country News. We also had, when we arrived in Canberra, there was an announcement put out by the government in the Australian paper suggesting that they were considering cutting foreign aid. And that was a big deal for us. I mean, that was our central campaign topic and actually quite threatening to our campaign. Now, I don't know if they chose the best day to do that because we were meeting with 92 MPs on the day that came out that morning. So we were perfectly positioned to run a media conference and do a whole lot of press releases on that topic. And what we did, and this was my first involvement as incoming CEO, was we ran that conference, but I was just sort of expecting Oak Tree to run that conference and for it to be Oak Tree and a couple of MPs. What happened was that our head of campaigns, Fee, she got on the phone to Save the Children, she got on the phone to a whole lot of different advocacy organisations and essentially coordinated the response of the aid sector to these threatened cuts. It was amazing, and at the end of the day, Julie Bishop came out and said that she would fight any cuts to the aid budget. So that was really encouraging for us.
Yeah, fantastic. And may I ask, how old are you?
24.
So they're making you the CEO, which is very exciting, isn't it? And why 27?
27, it's sort of... good question, really.
Let me tell you about the past. In the 60s, there were people called the Yippies. Has anyone heard of the Yippies? Oh, thank you. And some of us dye our hair and some don't. But basically, they said never trust anybody over 30. It's quite interesting to know where to put the definition. But 27, do you get people lying about their age, or do you look at their birth certificates?
It's we're not as strict as looking at the birth certificate. For us to really be a flexible organisation that engages with young people and retains that flexibility and retains that youthfulness, it's something that the board's chosen to do, and it's from its inception. So Oak Tree has always been young people, mid to late 20s is the cut-off point. Yeah. And what it does is it enables us to be really flexible, enables us to, we have a high turnover rate, which is a challenge, but also an opportunity because lots of people come into the organisation and get trained up. And also enables us to continue being a volunteer organisation because as people get older, they're equipped with skills and then there's a tension between going on to professional positions.
Well, they might want to buy something to live in or marry or have a baby or all those, cost-inducing activities. Sort of you say there are opportunities and challenges. Just give us a bit more of a sense of that, of high turnover.
Yeah, sure. So probably the biggest challenge that we face is that is high turnover, and part of that, addressing that challenge is keeping people engaged and motivated and challenging them. So what we try and do with all our positions is have clear pathways of professional development where people can really grow and be given more responsibility. I think one of the things that keeps people at Oak Tree is that they can really run and own something and see its effectiveness and be responsible for that. But
now, what about reputational damage? Isn't that what people talk about? You know what I mean by that, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Could you give a definition?
Yeah, well, we do have an ongoing joke about volunteers going rogue. Is how we refer to it.
The reason I say that is for something like Australian Red Cross, I'm assuming your national and international reputation is immensely precious, and so to give people the degree of autonomy. I'm sure there must be some people in the room just having a little bit of a shiver in their boots. So how do you manage that so you don't get a rogue?
Yeah, so I think like a lot of these things, they can be managed through structures. So Oak Tree, despite being full of young people, we've got a governance, we've got a board that's made up of people of all ages, and the board oversee and act as a counterbalance to some of the things that we want to do. And the other way is having structures. So every volunteer has a job description, has people they report to, like you would in any organisation, and there's clear expectations about what we do as volunteers, as Oak Tree, and we really try and train people. So it is a risk, but we hope that people are forgiving enough when we do come across those challenges. But there's ways we can mitigate it too.
Just tell us about your leadership development program.
Yeah, sure. A lot of what Oak Tree does is developing leaders. We give young people an enormous amount of responsibility, but we also have to equip them to do that because then we find people risk burnout if they're not facilitated and equipped to do what they want to do. So with our leadership development program, we run things where we basically bring people into Oak Tree and then do a whole lot of campaigning and skills-based training, but it's all orientated around action. So when we train someone up in, for example, how to do a phone bank, I think there might be a picture somewhere there, we're training them up in, and then they'll actually go and they'll call people and practice phone banking on foreign aid. So it's all associated with learning something and then doing it, and that what you're doing is having an impact that you're passionate about. So if we're phone banking on foreign aid, it's because the volunteers and Oak Tree is passionate about increasing the foreign aid budget.
So lessons for Red Cross. What would be the key things you would offer Red Cross from your experience that are vital for attracting and retaining young people?
I think the first thing, and it's quite clear, and that is the cause. Now, Oak Tree's cause is young people leading the movement to end extreme poverty. And when you're attracting young people, to have something clearly articulated as to why they want to be involved is really important. And Red Cross has amazing cause. And so I don't feel like that's difficult, but perhaps the way that's communicated with real clear and articulate. The second thing I think is providing avenues for young people to really be challenged and to have that responsibility. It is risky, and sometimes you can create headaches, but with young people, when they're motivated, engaged, empowered, they can be incredible agents for change, and in the issues that we care about.
And just finally, you've got a partnership exchange program, which I think sounds like it's got all the elements you've just said. Can you give us an example of that?
Yeah, sure. So something that we've launched, or we're actually about to launch, although it's been running for about 6 months now, is the Partnership Exchange Program. We have partners in Southeast Asia and Cambodia and Papua New Guinea, but we also have non-funded partners where they're basically set up for us to learn from social advocacy organisations over in the Asia Pacific and for them to learn from us. So for example, on the road trip, you'll see Remy there. Just back one, I think. Remy's amazing. She runs an incredible social change organisation in Cambodia. She does a lot of political lobbying and working with young people, and they're huge. And so what we had the amazing opportunity to do is to work with her organisation. She came on our road trip with a couple of her staff and trained us Australian volunteers in social advocacy. And she got to observe how we ran our road trip and engaged with politicians. It was actually amazing because in Cambodia, their situation is so different. I had the privilege of going with Remy into the Australian Parliament. Our team met with 92 MPs that day, but for her, the experience of actually sitting inside the House of Representatives and seeing people debate policy was unbelievable, because she doesn't get that in Cambodia. So to learn from that and to learn from those experiences, and we learnt so much from her team, and we'll continue to do so. I've got the privilege of going over to Cambodia early next year to learn from how they do strategy.
Golly, it's been fun to meet you. Would you give him a round of applause? Sorry, I've been flicking that a bit quickly. I need actually, as a facilitator, to develop a third arm, or to be less controlling, but it's probably a bit late in life for that. Any questions or comments for our first two speakers, or what's going on inside your brain? Would someone like to tell me, what are you thinking as you listen to our first two speakers about youth engagement? What have you picked up so far? Thank you. Do you mind just standing and introducing yourself? I'll hold it, yeah. Yeah. But stand up so they can stare at you. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I'm Pat Pearson. One of the things that's actually really struck me is about how you take on risk and don't seem scared of it. How you're able to analyse it and realise it can be an issue, but you're still prepared to get in there and give it a go. And I wonder whether that's something that's attached to youth itself and not necessarily somebody who's much older, like someone like me or our age groups.
Can I go to the older person on the panel? I'd like to introduce Georgie Ferrari, the CEO of the Youth Affairs Council of Victoria, and my apologies, no one's as old as me. Do you mind just standing up?
Certainly.
Yeah, make her welcome. Listen, it's too risky. Red Cross can't act like these people. What would you say?
I would absolutely agree. I think that I've been writing some notes, and one of the first things I wrote was risk. And one of the things I love about youth-led organisations is they laugh in the face of risk. They really do. From my perspective, I run a youth peak body in Victoria. We engage with lots of young people in the work we do, but we would never do some of the things that the youth-leds do. And probably we don't engage with as many young people because of it. We're not as successful because of it. So,
So what does your heart tell you and what does your head tell you?
My heart says go for it, absolutely. And I think what it does is challenge organisations like mine and probably the Red Cross to take a few more risks. A few years ago, we did a panel on social media, and we had Bryce Ives from ABC's Haywire program. Some of you all know Bryce, and he said, throw out the rule book. If the ABC had followed editorial policy on Q&A, they would never have had a Twitter feed, and it's the best thing about that program. And it really did stir us as an audience. It was actually the truth. It was like they just took a risk. The Q&A program took a risk and said, yeah, let's put a Twitter feed at the bottom of that. ABC didn't have any editorial guidelines around a Twitter feed and what to do with it. They took a risk, and it just took that program to another whole level in terms of engagement with the audience. It's the most popular thing about that program. So it's a really good lesson around going, take a risk, do something that's a little bit different. Don't go, I'm sorry, no, that's not in the guidelines, that's not policy, we can't do it.
Look, thank you. We're just trying to stir you up and get you thinking, where's Kathleen Mayo? I'm sorry, but I've got to go to someone younger. You know I'm only playing with you, don't you? No. Go, run towards me in an overexcited manner. Please make her welcome. Do you want to just introduce yourself and tell us what you do? They can't see us, so do you want to come up on the thing? Have you got high heels on?
I'm in heels, yeah.
Oh, that's good, because I read in today's paper, evidently you will get a lot more attention from men than me. It's probably not just the shoes, I'm going to be honest with you. Now, just introduce us and your connection to Red Cross. It's true, there's a story. They did this fantastic thing. 70% of men will come to you within 3 minutes if you've got really high heels on. They work. Flat shoes, I think you wait about 15 to 20 minutes. What's your connection to Red Cross?
So, my connection is I'm on the National Youth Advisory Committee. I represent Queensland. I'm also on the Divisional Advisory Board in my state, so in Queensland. And apart from that, I also volunteer.
And what volunteering do you do?
I do Save a Mate, and then I also do emergency services when there's disasters.
And just for our visitors from outside, what's Save a Mate in a nutshell?
Sorry, Save a Mate, or SAM as we call it. It's basically educating young people and the dangers of drugs and how to responsibly handle alcohol and drugs. Like, we know that it's done, so it's more like how to responsibly manage it. So we go to festivals, music festivals, for example. We hand out water, sunscreen. You communicate with people, have safe spaces where youth can go if they're feeling down or things like that.
We just lost a young woman in Sydney in very sad circumstances, a schoolgirl. You were part of a youth summit earlier this week. Can you just explain what that was and what you got out of that experience?
Yes, that was an amazing experience. So basically, I think about 30 or 40 youth leaders from around the country that all came together. That in itself was great because it's a bit hard. It's such a big organisation, such a big country. So that face-to-face, is really important. Also, we had the amazing opportunity to have the national leadership team come in the last couple of hours. So we actually were able to sit down with them. And this was my favourite part with the Red Cross. I've been to other organisations as well. We were able to sit down at tables and we were all equal. So, I was sitting next to directors, next to Robert Tickner was there as well, and we're just talking completely normally, about normal, but
They were old and powerful and yet apparently humane. But isn't it funny? We do almost talk about each other as if we're different creatures, isn't it?
Yeah, we're not. I mean, I have to say though, as when I first, for example, started on the board in Queensland, my first meeting was a bit intimidating. I was very young. Came in all these older men in in suits, and it was just some of them have very impressive titles. But, so in the beginning it was a little bit intimidating to speak my mind, but I was encouraged to do so, which was great.
Some of us in the small groups went to a session where a man called Ali from the Western Giants, which is an very new AFL team in Sydney, spoke, a Muslim man, and he said something that's been haunting me, and I've been thinking about it, that in order for people to join a group, they have to see themselves. There needs to be a mirror. And I thought that was very interesting. I mean, when we engage with the leadership groups, should it not just be men or women in suits? Should there be more than one young person? I'm just raising that really to be out there. But what was your key message to the executive when you did have contact with them? What would you like them to remember from your input?
My key message was pretty clear, and I think it echoes the sentiments of other people we've heard in the session. Basically, one of the great things about the Red Cross is that it is so well known. I'm from Europe originally, so my Red Cross story starts even before I came to Australia.
Where was that?
Denmark. So Danish Red Cross is, really big. So when I came here, I was like, oh, great, there's an organisation I can, see myself, with, no matter where I am in the world. But it's because it is so big and so well known, and it has such a long history, especially in Australia. I feel that sometimes people become a bit complacent with everyone knows Red Cross, the power of the emblem. So and kind of don't work as hard. Like some of the younger organisations like Oxfam, Oak Tree, we've just heard from, they're quite young. A lot of people don't know who they are, therefore they have to work a lot harder to get that message out. And so what I just want to kind of communicate to people is to not be too complacent and continue to keep up, because young people know the Red Cross, but they don't necessarily know what we do. And we have so many programs that aren't necessarily that well known.
Look, thank you so much, and be very careful getting down. It's my pleasure now to introduce Pearl Lee. Pearl, would you like to stand up just so people can see you? And Pearl is the chair of the National Youth Advisory Committee. And I think, how long have you been the chair?
Oh, not even 24 hours yet.
I'm going to ask you a lot about that committee. But you're also already the South Australian representative. Would you please make her welcome? If we could have Pearl's images, please. But can you just tell us, how did you get involved with Red Cross and what have you been doing with Red Cross?
How I got involved with Red Cross, if I'm being honest, was an accident. I was using the bathroom at university and I saw a flyer for volunteering. And I'd been volunteering throughout my life, so I went to this volunteer info session and I found out that Red Cross does a lot more than blood donation and emergency services. So a lot of what Katie just touched upon. And so I got involved with the uni club and I became president of the uni club, and I basically wanted to raise awareness on campus of all the different opportunities that Red Cross does. We're more than just bloods and floods.
And why? Why Red Cross? At uni, you could have done a whole ton of stuff. Put it close to your mouth.
Well, not to sort of like step
just
on
so we hear
anyone's
every
toes.
word.
Oh, so basically, I had been, volunteering with other organisations after I left school, but I just, certain values about them didn't really fit with me, and really it was impartiality, neutrality and independence that really spoke to me a lot, and having access to people in all different communities to do good work is what attracted me to Red Cross.
Okay. When you say all different communities, do you mean multicultural?
Multicultural, different demographics, wherever you are in the world, that sort of thing.
Okay. Now tell us about the Youth Leadership Pathways Project, because you in South Australia, because you believe that's quite an interesting example of youth engagement where some things have gone well and some things haven't. So this is sort of an example of reflective practice and lesson learning.
Yeah, so, Nick touched upon today about how they've got this internship program, which is fabulous. And the thing about Red Cross is we have so many different resources, training opportunities, and it's not just professional development, but life skills. And I think it's what we can offer to young people to make sure they have the best possible contribution to this organisation and the people that we work with. So basically, as a volunteer, we've always said, let's do more, let's upskill ourselves. And so I was able to work with the staff in South Australia, and they were able to liaise with national youth engagement staff as well to develop a program where not just youth volunteers and members, but beneficiaries, so the young people who are able to benefit from our services, are able to access these trainings, but also develop skills in program delivery, and also linking these different groups of young people, because we're not all the same. So beneficiaries, so it could be also clients of our programs, and having them mentored by volunteers as well, and volunteers by the leaders. So it's sort of saying that all these different young people can eventually become leaders within the organisation.
Now, there's been a survey of young people and views on Red Cross, which I was given the opportunity to read, and one of the things that came through was that it can be a bit cumbersome and slow, the processes. And even in what you've just, particularly about recruitment and getting opportunities for active engagement, and yet in what you've just said, you're talking about state and national office, you've clearly engaged in that bureaucratic dimension. I don't mean that as a negative. Tax and bureaucracy are the keys to civilisation. And I say that as a dentist of an orthodontist, and my apologies to my late father, who didn't believe in tax, but that's another story. You clearly see that more as opportunity and not just it takes too long.
Yeah,
Explain that.
Yeah, I mean, today we've talked about be bold, just try something, and I think this is a really good example of volunteers and members communicating to staff saying, we have an interest in this area, how can we work together to make this happen, and having that innovative environment to make it happen in the first place. So, I mean, yes, I understand why we do have certain bureaucratic processes and red tape to say, describe it that way. But there are ways of working through the system, I would say.
If we wanted to say, what can you get from participating in leadership in Red Cross? It's the ability to do this, which is a skill I think all managers in the room would know is utterly essential. So what's this picture?
So this is one of our young humanitarian nights. So we thought that we'd like to engage with members in a more meaningful way. And so what they wanted is professional development. So what we did, is basically we had a NGO careers night. So a lot of people were interested in how can I be involved in international aid, how can I get involved in being employed with an organisation like Red Cross. And we invited speakers from Red Cross as well, and also other organisations. And this was a really great turnout for one of these events.
One of the things I'm noticing is how open young people are, that their volunteering can have a career benefit. And there's no anxiety or concern about that's perfectly legit. I think that's a slight difference across generations, but that's one key thing I've got out of today. Show me what this is. Tell me what this is.
So this was another young humanitarian night. So not just looking at the professional sort of side of things, but also that social engagement, just getting to be around like-minded young people. And one of the things that our Youth Advisory Committee has been really interested in is learning from other organisations like Oak Tree and your VGens and your Amnesty Internationals. So what we did is we had an amazing race, and we invited teams from different organisations to run around Adelaide and basically quiz them on the different organisations' messages and things like that. And so after that, we were able to sort of swap stories, swap strategies such as social media ideas, how we engage with others, and how we could work together in the future.
So it's fun, active engagement.
Yes.
While learning.
Yeah.
The South Australian Migration Support Program, that's another thing you really believe is a great example of engagement with young people. Can you explain that?
Yeah, so this also developed in South Australia, so I'm very proud of my state. But basically, on our Youth Advisory Committee, we have a migration support rep, and she basically thought there's a lot more we could do with young people who have come to Australia. And what we thought was, why don't we assist them and have a peer-to-peer sort of mentoring system? So now we have young people linking up with unaccompanied minors to assist them with their English skills, but we've also broadened that to include recreational activities such as sports, that's an embarrassing photo, surf life-saving, and also life skills as well.
Okay, and what is this photo?
This is myself and another lovely lady who has a great name called Pearl. And basically we were asked to give pearls of wisdom.
It's two pearls!
Yeah, never heard that before.
and if you stay with Red Cross, will you get badges like she's got?
No comment.
No, but seriously, because I'm sure in one of the documents I was given that one of the things young people like is recognition. And of course, if you connect it back to opportunities of employment, both within and without, recognition and certificates and badges, they're great motivators, aren't they?
Yeah. But I think it's more than just getting a certificate and a badge. It is nice to feel valued, but it's ensuring that it's something enriching for you. So that's why I do think, having that meaningful engagement, whether it's through interacting face-to-face with people or just having some sort of training or something like that, is what value is.
Pearl, you are a deeper person than me. I was the kind of girl at school who wanted a lot of badges on her blazer.
I did too, but
What are your key messages about lessons you've learnt so far about engaging with young people to guide Red Cross in the future?
I think we need to stop thinking as young people as like one group. It's not just like, we all want to be involved, we all want to be governance, like committee members and that sort of thing. And it's addressing, that there's people in different sort of areas and how can we engage with them in different ways. There's different levels of motivation and not everyone wants to say, I want to spend 15 hours doing this job. Or some people just want to say, I just want to volunteer in a program, and that's how I can give back to the community.
Yes. And of course, we're here today to talk about engaging staff within as leaders as well. My understanding is that 45% of Australian Red Cross staff nationally are 35 or under. 45%. So in fact, the workforce is very significantly young. And so the strategy for young people's engagement talks about youth education, youth empowerment, and creating enabling environments. Among those enabling environments is people like this girl getting employed and being managers, isn't it? I mean, how old are you
Is that an offer? Like,
Unfortunately, I'm a self-employed, girl who wants a badge. Remind me how old you are again?
I'm just turned 23.
Look, seriously, guys. I was recently doing a session just like this for Australian dentists. I know here come the dentists again. And I was interviewing a young dentist, and they were talking about whether this generation could be given power and authority. He ran his own business. He was married with 2 children. And we were still calling him young. Sometimes I think the baby boomers are clinging on a little hard. They seem competent to me, don't you think? Well, look, let's meet you. You're young. Do you want to come over here? Could you give Pearl a round of applause, please? I'm grabbing this man because he looks competent.
I don't really want to come over here. I mean,
Just introduce yourself and tell us your connection.
I'm Will, and I'm the chair of KIAC. It is incredibly.
I told you it was intrusive.
Yeah.
So give us your full name and just unpack that acronym.
Okay, that's true. This is the Red Cross, the land of acronyms. I'm Will Matthews, and I'm chairperson of the Queensland Youth Advisory Committee, which means we sit under the DAB board as advisory for all youth roles. And I see myself, to Kevin and the board, as a one-stop youth shop.
What's the single most important thing you've taken from what's happened so far in this room? Something about how to attract and retain young people at all levels of Red Cross in all activities. What are you thinking about as you listen to these people?
There's 2 parts to that. The first part is our youth networks across the country aren't very good, and everyone understands that. And I feel it's up to going with Oak Tree and other places like that to connect.
What do you mean they aren't very good?
We don't have people on the ground in those areas that have that connection with youth. We do have a lot of branches, and that has an older demographic, and we need to enrich that, and other groups are more able to satisfy that.
And what was the second point?
Oh, God.
Sorry, I interrupted you.
Oh, yes. Places like this are incredibly good, I think everyone would agree, for a collaboration. The movement is so big, no one knows what's going on. And when we come into a group like this, we go, oh my God, you're doing what I want to do. And give me everything you have and I will steal it. Yeah.
So more opportunities to come together with the whole mix of Australian Red Cross and learn what each other are doing. That's something you'd value.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm a facilitator. I just repeat what you said. But look, thank you for letting me grab you. Would you give him a round of applause, please? And Sam Millett, where's Sam? Look, he's right over the other side, which is good because this is you run towards me, I'll run towards you, and then when we meet, we kiss. Well, that's not compulsory. You're already big, so let's come up here together just so they can all see you. Do you mind? Can you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Sam Millett from the WA Youth Advisory Committee, which is the WA version of the Queensland one you just heard about.
It's always important to involve Western Australia because they feel that we take their tax and spend it over here. You have an example of a connection to a community radio station that you think was a really effective example of youth engagement. Can you tell me about it?
Sure. We ran a project, well, it was already running when I joined the YAC in WA, which was focused around trying to connect with a younger demographic. We've heard a lot about that today.
How old are you?
I'm 26. Fairly old for the youth contingent, it seems. But
got one more year to get into Oak Tree. Not that I want him to go.
one of the things with connecting with youth, quote unquote, is that, as has been mentioned, we tend to treat them as a homogenous group. And the radio spots that we put together contained information about various different Red Cross programs, from nuclear weapons through to refugees, through to international humanitarian law. They weren't youth per se, they were just communicated in a sensible and straightforward manner, and they enabled people from a younger demographic to engage with ideas on their own terms. You can't go into youth issues and treat people as if they are somehow different just by virtue of the fact that they're youth. They have different ways of engaging with the structures that are present around them. Social media is the one that comes up all the time, but they're not fundamentally different to most of the people in the room. And we were very successful in that. We got lots of positive feedback, lots of people calling, lots of people talking, and getting information out there in a sensible adult way to young people has proven effective just as much as engaging with social media.
And how did you form that relationship with the radio station? Like, how did that come about?
Well, as I mentioned, I wasn't involved in setting the relationship up. RTR expressed interest to us as the Youth Advisory Committee in doing something related to the Red Cross, obviously.
That's the FM station, RTR.
Yes, correct, sorry. More acronyms. I'm not even sure what it stands for, but they're an alternative radio station. And obviously Red Cross has been doing quite a bit in the Centenary year, and they wanted to engage with what we were doing. And so we took the approach of providing information, and they put it together in a radio-friendly format.
Have you ever played rugby union?
No, I haven't. I wasn't much of a sporty kid, slightly more so these days.
No, it's just I could imagine you in a ruck and maul, if you don't mind me saying so. Listen, I've really enjoyed talking to this gentleman. Would you give him a warm round of applause, please? Thanks. I'd now like to introduce Daniel Hamilton, and if I could have his images. Hi, Daniel. Do you want to introduce yourself and explain your connection to Red Cross?
Sure. Oh, yep, better. Hi, everyone. I'm Daniel Hamilton, obviously, and I'm the Northern Territory representative to the National Youth Advisory Committee, the same as Pearl was the South Australian representative.
And if we could just have the images. Good, thank you. And you're also involved with UN Youth Australia with the extraordinary title of Internal Review Officer.
It's much more impressive than it sounds.
But it's
Other way around, I think.
But it's a volunteer position, but just tell us, what is UN Youth Australia and what do you do?
As we've heard, young people like to fly ahead with great ideas, but often that comes at a cost of governance and, logistical capabilities behind that. So my job now is to ensure that the organisation is progressing in a way that allows us to continue that for the long term.
So tell us about this Global Youth Conference. I said to him, what's a great example of youth engagement that you'd like to share? And this came straight off your lips, and there it is. What is it, and what was its purpose, and why was it so good?
As I'm sure nearly everyone in the room is aware, except for some of our guests, last year Australian Red Cross played host to the statutory meetings of the Federation. And side by side, the Youth Network held the Global Youth Conference, featuring delegates from nearly all of the national societies across the world to get together and collaborate and learn from one another.
And you loved it, didn't you? You thought it really, really worked. You talked about there was lots of choice, you met really experienced people, and you loved the international nature of it. Just tell us a bit more about all that.
Sure, I think I'll start from the bottom going up. Having that many people come together from across the world, there was really an international feel, and it gave me a fresh look on our federation and truly understanding that we are in so many countries across the world, and that truly our differences are quite small when we all come together. It reminded me that we all share one passion, and that's to help the vulnerable people in our societies. And that really gave me a refreshing look on what we do as a national society.
And why was having lots of choice as part of the conference so good? Because you felt that was good for the young people.
Yeah. I think that, as we've talked about earlier, young people aren't a homogenous group, and we all have our own preferences, we all have our own passions. And the fact that the Global Youth Conference kind of catered to different choices that we all had really gave it a feel that it was tailored to you specifically. And it really gave us our own abilities to try and immerse ourselves in areas where we felt we'd get the most out of it.
And people being experienced, what do you mean?
I think that back then I was fairly new to Red Cross in terms of actual experience. The people that came to the conference had a wealth of knowledge that I, would have never thought I'd be able to access. People like the National Youth members from the Netherlands and parts of Scandinavia, just all over the world. There was a lot of time to talk to them all, and it was very peer-to-peer engagement kind of style, which was very effective.
When you say back then, what month of 2013 was it?
Was it?
It was on the front of it. I'll just go back.
Yeah, thank you.
It was November.
Yes.
So, I just think there is something in this. I don't want to frighten you, but when you get older, people can become a little jaded, a little, we've done that before and it didn't work. Do you know what I'm saying? And just the fact that he can look back 1 year and say, I didn't know so much back then. You know what I mean? The extraordinary capacity of the young. I've just killed the system. Did you notice that? I'm hoping he can fix that. Did I turn something off? I'll get help if I may with this little clicker, but just sticking with you. You are learning at a rate of knots, aren't you? And you're full of excitement about it.
Yes.
Maybe I'm projecting into this young man, but can I just say, when I'm working, I love to be surrounded by people several decades younger than myself, because there is generally curiosity, as you've mentioned earlier, and energy and hope for the future that can flag after 50. Does anyone know what I'm talking about here? Is anyone prepared to support me on this? I can see some darkness in the back of your eyes. Can I just meet you for a moment? Just stand up and say hello to me. Do you mind saying your name and your connection?
It's Kerry Gray, and I'm from the Northern Rivers of New South Wales.
Could you turn up my level, please? So I can get a bit of a boost. And who wanted to clap? Clap her. She's from the Northern Rivers. When I said that sometimes older people can lack a level of curiosity and enthusiasm, did you know what I was saying?
Definitely. I guess that's one of the problems with engaging with people now, that they think they do know everything, and we never know everything, and we all are still learning till the day we die, I think.
Exactly. And the young people know that, don't they?
Well, I hope they do, because we haven't got much hope if they don't.
Thank you for letting me come up to you, but I could just see that she understood what I was saying. Thank you very much for coming back to those images. So that conference, the Global Youth Conference, what are the lessons we can take from that could help guide the future for Red Cross?
In terms of the advice that I give the Red Cross moving forward, I think we need a larger focus on peer-to-peer learning. The Federation has acknowledged that peer-to-peer learning is extremely effective with the Youth as Agents of Behavioural Change strategy that most countries, most national societies have adopted. Personally, speaking from experience, I feel that peer-to-peer engagement gives young people a way to engage on a level that isn't them being told things to learn. It's a way that everyone is able to come to their own understanding of the topic they're exploring, and I think that's really meaningful engagement.
And what does peer-to-peer engagement mean? Yeah, I think you had an example of it at the UN Youth, the Territory Conference in 2014, didn't you? Can you explain what that conference was and what the peer engagement was?
Sure. So every year, UN Youth Northern Territory, United Nations Youth Northern Territory, runs what we call Territory Conference, which is an event aimed at targeting high school students across the Northern Territory and teaching them about the values of the UN, humanitarian action, and global peace and security. This year, the event was organised by 4 young people, 3 of which were under the age of 18, in a period of about 2 months. So it was quite a rush to get pushed through.
And how many people came?
We got 47 in the end, from across the Darwin, Palmerston and wider regions. Okay. And I think that at the end of the conference, the thing that I took most away from it was the fact that we had all become very good friends. It was only 3 days of engagement, but the way that it was based around peer-to-peer engagement, that there was really no barrier between who a facilitator was and who a participant was, gave it an extra depth that meant that we weren't here to teach you things. We were here to explore the same topics that you were exploring, and we all had something to gain from it.
And it was held in Parliament House in Darwin, wasn't it?
Yes, thanks to the generosity of the Chief Minister.
And the core purpose of that gathering?
I think most of all, UN Youth Northern Territory is a very small division, as most things in the Northern Territory are, unfortunately. We wanted to be able to develop UN Youth in Northern Territory to engage high school students and give them the power to make the change in their communities. So from that conference, we've since had 2 school groups start up across the Northern Territory, designed around running programs in their schools and around their community to further the aims of the organisation.
So that's a measurable result. You must be thrilled with that, are you?
Yeah, I'm very happy that we've been able to put that forward.
Well, when I spoke to you about it on the phone, you said there was a really strong connection between the participants and the organisers. There were really clear outcomes that you were desiring to get, and that the participants helped you design what they would actually do during the 3 days.
Yeah, prior to the conference actually beginning, the four of us engaged a lot with the young people in our community and with the participants that had already signed up to craft something that meant that they were getting the most out of the conference that they could possibly get. We wanted to give them the power to determine what topics they were talking about at the conference and be able to give that into a variable effect so that when they came out, they'd be able to action what we talked about in their communities.
Daniel, would it be honest to say that it was just great not to have any older people there?
I can't say that there were no older people there. We generally had a lot of panellists with a lot of experience from around the community, the head of DFAT, the administrator of the Northern Territory at the time, and we drew a lot on their experience to kind of give it an extra depth that young people simply don't have the experience yet to understand.
Okay, so it was a true partnership.
Yeah, and I think that's what we need to move towards, collaboration between young people, revitalising the organisation and relying on our older demographics' experience and knowledge of the organisation that we simply don't have yet. And that's something that we all appreciate of our older members, that we know that you have a lot of experience to share. We know that you understand the history of the Red Cross, and we want to learn that too.
But it's that attitude of mutual respect, mutual learning, mutual listening. I recently ran another event of this nature, a one-day forum where a group was trying to get younger members. They invited younger members in, they paid for their airfares from across the country. I won't mention the group, a professional group. But all the speakers were over 60. And I said gently, it might be good to have some younger speakers talking about how to attract younger people. And it wasn't a joke. Do you know what I mean? And they were good people. They were bothering to have the workshop. They'd bothered to identify people. They'd got them into a room. But it wasn't what you're describing. It wasn't... Somehow there was a lack of humility, almost a feeling we have to teach them stuff quickly in order to attract them. I just share that with you. You know, it's interesting. Could you give this young man a warm round of applause, please? And if Georgie Ferrari could please have the microphone. Georgie, you've had a lot of listening to do.
I've been doing a lot of writing.
Just introduce yourself and just tell us what are the themes that have come through so far that you're interested in.
Sure. So my name is Georgie Ferrari. I'm the CEO of the Youth Affairs Council of Victoria. We're the peak body in Victoria. An organisation with a long and proud history of youth participation. We're 55 years old next year. I'm a little bit younger than that myself, but I certainly don't fall into the youth category anymore. So the three, I guess I've been scribbling a lot, and because I am not young, I have to refer to my notes because my memory's not so good. I guess a few of the key things that I want to talk about, I heard somebody early on say the Red Cross needs to reinvent itself. And then that came up again, I think, Daniel, you sort of alluded to it as well. That is a big challenge to this organisation. Reinvention is huge. And I think one of the things I often talk about when I talk about youth participation or youth engagement is that it requires a cultural change within an organisation if it's going to be truly successful. And you, as an organisation, have to be completely honest about whether you are prepared for that cultural change, because you have to give some power over if you're going to do it properly. And if you're going to do it with meaning, and I've heard the word meaningful a lot on the stage already. So that's a challenge back out to you. If you want to reinvent yourselves as an organisation, you are going to have to give some power over, and you are going to have to embrace cultural change.
Could I ask for the images, please, for Georgie?
Yeah, get me off the screen.
No, don't wait. No, love yourself. I mean that seriously. 50% of your board are young people. How do you define young?
Young people under the age of 26 at the time of election.
Now, what are the benefits and the challenges of sharing power to that degree?
I guess the first thing is that we are symbolically and meaningfully sharing power. So I'm really proud to tell people that I have a board made up of 50% young people. So that's an important message as a leader in this sector. I can't talk about youth participation without walking it. So to say that we share power at that level, I think is really important. And that young people know, I say this all the time, whenever I'm advising other groups who are looking at this sort of structure, I'm saying don't set up a side committee that will advise the board, because young people know where the power is and they want in.
Yes, but what are you again? You're a youth affairs council.
That's right.
These aren't just youth, they're dealing with the whole population.
That's true.
So is one enough on the board?
Well, I would say one is token, I'm sorry. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, but the word token came up earlier and I wrote that one down as well, because I really think to expect one young person on a board to hold their own amongst a group of people who have years more experience, it's a big ask for a young person. So I would say 3 minimum. I don't know how many are on the board, but 3 minimum.
Now be honest with us, the strengths and the challenges.
Sure, and I will be the first to admit there are challenges to having 5 young people on a board. I've got a board of 11, and to have, I've got a board of 10 with 1 co-opted member at the moment who's bringing in specialist expertise, so a board of 10, 50% young people. I think the key challenge is if you have any passengers in that 5 or in the 5 who are non-young people, then you are in trouble, because then you have fewer people with any experience being able to fully contribute. So by passengers or travellers, I mean people that aren't really contributing. They turn up, but you can see that they're on Facebook or that they're doing something behind their screen that is not engaging in the meeting. So that's about putting the resources into the organisation to support those young people to be fully engaged and fully participating. And that takes money and that takes time. So it's, yeah.
And the benefits?
Oh, the benefits are enormous. The benefits, from our perspective, the benefits are around, as I said, walking the talk around what we mean and what we believe in youth participation. But it's also about changing the nature of what we see our board as. So we've changed our board to understand that it's actually a training ground as well. So it's a governance body, but it's also got an element or an aspect of training, and that's important. So older, non-young members know that they've got a role as being buddies and being supports to young people, and we model that buddy system and that mentoring system in our board. But beyond that, one more benefit, which I think is enormous, is young people are not afraid to ask the questions. I bet that there's 3 or 4 adults or non-young people on the board that need to ask the stupid question but are too frightened to ask. Young people will ask it, and it takes us to places that we don't normally go in conversations, which I think is really enormously beneficial.
I have to manage the time brutally, so
Sure.
just excuse me, but we want to talk about the Youth Untitled Conference and also YERP, which is a website which you'll see. The Youth Untitled Conference, in a nutshell, what is it? And tell us about diversity. You've got views about diversity, haven't you?
I've got many views about diversity. Okay, so we've got a youth reference group in addition to our board, a group of 15 young people that select themselves and select new recruits into it on an annual basis. That group is resourced by a paid staff member, and they have their own budget of about $5,000 per annum. With that money, they can do whatever they want. I don't have any say over what. They get allocated that funding and they do what they want with it, and they have a worker that supports them that we pay for in the organisation. This group of youth reference group a year and a half ago decided they were going to have a conference called Youth Untitled, and they did a big survey and they got a whole lot of responses, and they decided that they were going to focus on 3 topics. And they managed to get a really diverse range of young people there. About 90 young people came and they had this conference, and it was all great. And leading out of that conference was a call for our youth reference group to become more diverse in themselves.
And do you mean multiculturally diverse?
Oh, I mean sexual orientation diverse, I mean age range diverse, I mean geographical location diverse, and I of course mean culturally and linguistically diverse.
And you believe there's a challenge there in your organisation that can be across the board. So in essence, the lesson you've learned about the challenge and your thoughts for your own organisation and Red Cross.
Well, I think it was interesting because when we put it back to the youth reference group that there's been a call for them to become a little bit more diverse, the shutters went down a little bit because they actually quite like their group and they aren't terribly diverse, and this is a real challenge in youth participation, I think, across the board. I'm happy to own it for my own organisation. We tend to attract what I like to call the bright and shinies. They're articulate and usually pretty well educated and, white middle class, arts law Monash, arts law Melbourne, that kind of thing. All the cliches, really, and I see it not just in my own organisation but in a lot. Now, that's not to say that those kids are not valuable and aren't worthy of contributing to our organisation. I'm a white middle class kid myself, let's be honest, let's own our own privilege. But how do we, as a group, go, oh, look at us, we all look the same. Oh, how...
Well, Ali, the guy from the Giants, hand up if you're in the Giants class. Do you mind just standing up, just so it's not just my voice? Just be quick. We don't have time for you to be sensitive. Introduce, come down here quickly. You're blonde and you're going to show how smart blonde people are. That was a joke. No, it's not. Your name and your connection to Red Cross?
My name is Ali as well, and I'm the membership coordinator in Adelaide.
Well, that Ali from the Giants AFL, he said, unless my people in my communities can see themselves on the team and in the organisation, we're not coming. What did you think of that statement? Like, do we have to have cultural diversity on display or more culturally diverse people won't come?
Definitely, because we live in a multicultural society, and if we don't show that mirror that Ali was talking about, we won't engage our community.
And how diverse is Red Cross? I don't know.
It's pretty diverse, yeah. We've got lots, particularly in South Australia, our migration support programs brought in a myriad of wonderful different cultures, so we are very diverse.
Okay, look, thank you for letting me grab you. It's just that young Ali, I think those of you will agree who heard him, was very inspirational. Just tell me your other two themes very quickly before I do YERP and close the session.
Oh, we don't have to do YERP. YERP's a website.
I love YERP.
Oh, okay. Right. Oh, you've checked it out. YERP is good. Look, I guess when I read the International Red Cross Youth 2020 strategy document, and I did do a bit of prep for the session.
Give her a round of applause. She read the document.
Thank you. I really want to congratulate the Red Cross on tackling these issues. I think it's really fantastic. But when I read that document, what I did not see anywhere in it was all about what we're going to do for young people to come to us. There wasn't anything reflective about what are we going to do as an organisation to make it a place where they want to come. So it was all about how we're going to reach out, not how we're going to reflect and look in on our organisation to make the change, to be the organisation that young people will come to. So that would be a challenge, and I think we've heard it across here as well. Understand why young people are motivated to volunteer and want to come to your organisation, and make it an organisation that young people want to come to.
And was there one other thing in your theme list?
Oh, let me have a wee look.
Too long? Okay. No, I'm just joking.
No.
Listen, let's just do YERP because it's
Okay,
good.
let's just do YERP.
How meetings work. If more people could chair meetings, we wouldn't care what age you were. We'd love you.
Well, YERP's not just about how meetings work. YERP is an online toolkit for both young people and organisations who want to get serious about youth participation or youth engagement. So it's www.yerp.org.au, and it is a series. It's everything. It's tip sheets. It's video. It's information, it's resources, and you can enter it as a worker or as a young person, and it's got stuff in there that will help you think through how you're going to be better at doing youth participation. And I think it's a really key resource. We've drawn on over 10 years of our experience of doing it and talked to a whole lot of other organisations who are doing it even better than us.
Look, thank you. You can see why I wanted to let her mention YERP. Would you please give her a round of applause? Ladies and gentlemen, just before I close, Benson, could I just ask one last thing of you, if you could take the mic? I forgot to ask you, did you have any advice to Red Cross or lessons from your experience of engagement to guide them as they move forward. I just thought I'd give you the last word.
Yeah, sure. And
do you want to stand up? It just helps them see you.
Georgie touched on it a fair bit around who are we wanting to engage as well. So I guess it's almost putting a challenge out. So the Red Cross, I'm not standing over here. Sorry, I don't know why. But it's an amazing organisation. It's been around for 100 years. Is the idea that you're going to exist for another year, for another 100 years, or is it actually? Are we going to name what our big challenges are here? Big challenges that we really want to face, and are we actually existing to not exist? And I think that's something that, as an organisation, you need to really, I think about and understand.
Could you just say that again?
Sure.
So I'm just not sure I understood. Are you saying it's like an opportunity to think, if we were starting today, what would we set out to do?
Yeah, kind of. So, so are we existing just to exist? So are we existing to do the same thing, to follow the same path that we've always been on for another 100 years and for 100 years after that? Or today we're all meeting here from right across the nation. Are we existing to not exist? Are we working ourselves out of the job? Are we working ourselves out of the space? Because the issues that we are tackling are the big issues that are challenging society, but they're not going to be the same issues if we put 110% of our effort, of our volunteers, into addressing these wicked problems. I wanted to say that, wicked problems. I've been reading a document lately and it's just saying wicked problems, so I thought I'd throw it in.
Yeah, because how would you define a wicked problem, like from your reading?
So when I look at wicked problems and I think about wicked problems, I think about the ageing population. So in the next 20 years, we're going to have 6 workers for every 2.5 workers. Now, 6 pensioners for every 2.5 workers.
And look at me when you say that.
So the question is, are we going to cut services to the ageing population, or are we going to just tax our 2.5 workers? So
Look,
these are the big issues.
I'll be honest with you, mate, we're going to tax you to buggery.
Yeah.
Because I've got so many knees and so many hips, and I'm going to have 3 or 4 if I'm lucky enough. And I'm joking, but it's not funny.
And then another wicked problem as well is looking at climate refugees. So when we're looking up to our nearest neighbours up in Papua New Guinea, across the islands, suffering from rising sea levels and not being able to grow crops because of the salts in the soil. What are we going to do about these kind of issues? So these are issues that the older generation aren't necessarily going to face, unfortunately. But there is a legacy here that we need to be thinking about around what kind of world do we want our young people to inherit. What can we do today when we're standing at the precipice of time right now? Now's the critical time to act. What are we doing as an organisation? Where do we see ourselves in 20 years' time? Do we actually see ourselves existing in 20 years' time? And do we actually see our young people that are standing up now, like Daniel, who's an amazing young fellow, who I've been following his journey for a little while, and he's a wonderful fellow on the road for big things. Yeah. Do we want to see him actually running an organisation, or do we want to see him actually closing down the doors and saying, you know what, we did our work here, we did what we set out to do? I was recently at a slam poetry event, not myself, but I was listening to this fella, and this guy said, if the world stopped producing guns tomorrow and started producing instruments, what kind of instrument and what music would you play? And I think that's a really beautiful thing to ask, because I can't even imagine a world without guns, but I can imagine a world with instruments. And then I think it's what does that world look like for each and every one of us? Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you.